welcome to the August the 25th, 1986 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, where we're bringing back memories of Grand Prairie, Texas of the past. And this is history tape number 23. We're getting right down the road in our history tapes, and we have brought one of the most interesting citizens of Grand Prairie, Texas into view today. And Romy Mildred Sandlin Stewart, just lovingly known as Romy Stewart. Welcome to our show, my dear.
Thank you, Ruthie.
We're just delighted to have you with us. Romy, you're almost a history text within itself, since you have been so very important to the community development of Grand Prairie, Texas. And before we get into your community activities of the past and of the present, we'd like for you to tell us just a little bit about the history of the Sandlins and the Collier side of your family, and start out giving us your genealogy. Give us your mother and father's name and where their parents came from, and look right out into your camera and give us a couple of 3 minutes of good Romy Stewart history.
Well, Ruthie, my mother's mother, Mary Collier, was brought over from Virginia to Texas, to Delta County. Her father brought her on a horseback when she was a little less than a year old. Brought her to stay with his sister. Her mother had died when she was only a few months old. And my father came to Texas alone. He was born in Alabama, migrating to Arkansas at a young age, and grew up in Arkansas to be 18, and then he left home and came to Texas.
Well, now, what would provoke an 18-year-old to leave home in Arkansas, one of the loveliest states surrounding Texas?
Well, he was a stepson to his stepmother, you will see. His mother died when he was born, and his father married a school teacher, went to Arkansas, and here, being the oldest in the family, he had to take care of the younger ones. There were 3 boys and 3 girls born to this couple, and so of course he had to take the lead. And at the ripe old age of 18, he gets tired of this, so he decides to do something about it. So he hops a coal car and he comes to Texas.
Now, for those in our viewing audience that don't know about a coal car, that is a part of a freight train that's immediately behind the engine, right?
That's a boxcar
It's
that
one of
carried coal when coal was popular.
All right. And he came to Texas, and when he came to Texas, where did he land in Texas?
Well, he had 65 cents, as he told us, in his pocket. And can you imagine a man with 65 cents to his name and having to eat? He began to look for work. So he ran into a man who was looking for cotton pickers. And it happened to be my mother's brother-in-law. So he came down to Delta County with him to help him gather his crop and plant the next year's crop. So there's where he met my mother. She was 14 and he was 21 when they married.
Now, Delta County, the county seat of Delta County, to let everyone know where we're located.
Cooper, Texas.
Cooper, Texas.
The hub of the universe.
The hub of the universe. And is this where you still go back for your family reunions?
Well, we have it at different places. We're going to have it this year at my house. Since Mother and Dad passed away, we scattered around. But we did go back every year for this.
All right. Now, your mother's name was?
Ethel May DeWitt.
All right.
Her mother, after she grew up, married a DeWitt, who came from Virginia also, but they didn't meet till they got to Delta County. And there they had, my mother had, there were 7 in her family.
All right.
And she was next to the baby when, of course, met and married my father.
All right. Now, when your mother and father married and they settled down in Cooper, Texas, what did he do for a living?
Well, he farmed. He raised cotton, and he also had a job at the gin weighing cotton. And it was real funny, Ruthie. Mother often told this story, that the baby of the family on Sunday morning when they'd see my daddy was scared of him. Because he left before daylight and it was dark when he got home, and he didn't see the baby of the family till he was 2 or 3 years old. And she kidded him about that all his life.
All right, now, they married, they lived in Cooper, and he was a farmer and weighed cotton. Now, how many children came along? And tell us about your immediate family. Romy.
11.
11 children.
7 girls and 4 boys. And he used to say that he wanted us to get an education. Of course, he worked hard and we helped, and he owned, of course, we said when he died he was worth more than all 11 kids put together.
Yes.
Because he was practical, and he often said that he wanted every one of us to get an education, and he would complain about, says, I'm buying East Texas State Teachers College out by the month.
Yes, yes.
There's 1 to 3 of us there for years, you know, went to
Yes.
college.
And of all of the children, how many did finish college, Romy?
Out of the 11, 7.
7. That is a wonderful percentage for that time of our century, wasn't
Yes,
it?
yes, it was.
All right, now.
But each one, as we finished, we kind of helped the others too.
All right, now, your parents, did they live and die in around Cooper?
Yes. They bought a farm and lived on it. I know I was 5 years old when we moved to just about a half a mile. He bought more land, and that's where he died.
All right, now, when you came along, where did you go to school? At Cooper, Texas?
No, we had a country school.
All right.
We all went to this country school.
Tell us the name of your country school.
Mount Joy.
Mount Joy. All right, and was this a 7th grade or an 11th grade school?
It was his 8th grade.
8th grade.
See, that back in those days, that counties had a lot of schools. You know, I think little second smallest county in Texas is Delta County, and if I'm not mistaken, it had 42 schools.
And then when they came into the
They
high
consolidated,
school, where did
and we
they
had to go to Inlow.
Inlow.
And then the young ones had to go to Cooper.
All right, and when
They consolidated.
when you graduated from Inlow,
Right.
then you went right on to East Texas
Yes,
State.
I sure did.
All right. What did you do at East Texas State that was real important? What did you major in?
Well, I majored in elementary education first, and taking homemaking with it along,
All right.
because that was the quickest way to get out and get a job, to teach school. I started teaching school back in 1929
Where?
in the east part of the county at what we call Kinsang.
Kinsang.
Yes.
And was this in a secondary
It was
school or
a
elementary?
four-teacher school.
A four-teacher school? What grade level?
$90 a month.
What grade level?
I taught the 4th and 5th grade.
All right. And after you left that area, where did you go?
I went to Lamar County and I taught there a couple of years at Bairdstown. Then I went to Pecan Gap and back in Delta County.
Back in Delta County.
And from Delta County I went to Grapevine.
All right. Now, where did you meet Mr. Stewart?
In Grapevine.
In Grapevine,
Yes.
Texas, you met Mr. Stewart there, and then you all married.
And then I was out of teaching for about 3 years. After he was killed, I was going to go back, and I thought I'd go back to teaching. And I wanted to finish. See, I had graduated, but I wanted to major in homemaking. So before I started back to work, I decided to go back to school. And I went to school.
Then what happened?
I went to school for all that winter, and to get certified, you know, I had to take some science courses and some practice teaching. I had done my practice teaching in the 2nd grade. And so I did that, and then I got to looking for a job, and of course it was just before the war started. And our first job I had was I opened the school lunch program in Lamar and Delta County. That was the beginning, if you remember that, back in the WPA days. And after that was over, I had a job in Johnson County. Wouldn't that have been nice, as a home demonstration agent? I didn't take that one. Also as a counselor at a USO in Oklahoma. And then I found out about Avion Village. And in fact, I had a telegram waiting for me for an interview. So since I'd been in and out of Grand Prairie ever since 1928, and I had 2 sisters living here, I decided that I would come to Grand Prairie.
Oh, we've got to get these pictures of Avion Village out. What year did you come to Grand Prairie, Texas?
42, permanently.
In 1942, permanently,
yes.
to take a job with Avion Village. And I know that many of the people know of the history of Avion, but give us a little short recap so they'll know
Well,
what
a lot
Avion
of people
Village
think
was.
Avion, they get it confused, Ruthie, with war housing. Avion was built for permanent housing. Colonel Westbrook from Washington, D.C., built 5 over the United States, I believe, 3 or 5, I don't recall. And it was called a co-op housing, where a man was housed according to the size of his family, and he paid according to the size of the house he used. And if his family grew, if it was a couple, they had an apartment, 1 bedroom. As a child came along to 2 bedroom, 2 child or more, or 2 of the opposite sex, they moved into a 3 bedroom. It was built for permanency. And in time that the people would buy their share of their property, you see. And it was, he came up with this idea. He said over in Japan, they live in paper houses, and said they last for hundreds of years because of the upkeep they gave these houses. So that's why we had it operated like we had. They paid a book fee for utilities and for operation. We had it divided out. We paid so much on the operating cost, and in the RM&R account, which that was repair, maintain, and replace. Something happened to your home, well, you'd call down to the office, and the maintenance man come up and fix it.
All right, now, Romy, of all of the housing that was built in Avion Village, how much of that village remains today?
All of it.
All of it.
See, when the war really got here, well, they built those emergency houses, war housing, we call that, the barracks, and operated those under a lease from the government. And that's where people got the idea they were built, temporary.
All right, this is a picture, and if you would hold that up for your camera, that is a picture of you in your office in 1940.
43 or 4, I don't remember, Ruthie. Somewhere, beginning with, we'll say, of the spring of 43. I went there as a home counselor, and that was assistant to the manager. I had to teach the women how to use electricity, how to do quantity cooking, and because they'd come in out of the farm to do war work. And this is one of the party we had down there, costume party.
That is a costume party.
And we had an arts and craft club, we had bridge clubs, we had a mother's club who did civic work for
Tell us what this is.
And on it, in August the 16th of 42, it opened.
All right.
And they had a party, you know, and so every year, August the 16th, we had a watermelon feast. And this was, somebody snapped this picture. This is the late Carlisle Smith, Senior, and Howard M. Hall. And here I am eating watermelon.
All right. Now, this is a very exciting one that happened at Avion. What is
this was on, we were on TV. We had a contest of TV, not TV, but
hats.
Yes, hat contest. And this is the one, this is all of the hats, and I won the first prize, and that was my hat. We was on radio, you see. This was a radio program out of, which is Channel 5 now. And some of these women in this picture right here, still living in Grand Prairie.
I think we ought to hold that one up a little bit longer for our camera,
so that they can recognize them.
Yes, wouldn't that be fun?
That it really was. I look at it every now and then, and I just die laughing when I look over there and recognize some of these women that's still living here.
All right, now here's another of some of the activities that you did. Would you explain what you all were doing there?
We had an arts and craft club too. We had bridge, arts and craft, and sewing club. I had a sewing club, and we had scouts, had a scout group, and we did it just everything. That's why they call us a city within a city.
Because you supervised all of the activities there. What is this, Romy?
And this was a play. I'll tell you, this was put on by, this is Helen Fisher right there.
Oh, and that is Pat
Watson's
Watson's mother.
Mother, yes.
Yes,
and
Watson's mother.
We put on a skit. And this was the one where it said, the British are coming, you know, Paul Revere's Ride.
Yes.
And the curtain fell down. And this girl is from Dallas right there. She's still around.
All right, tell us a little bit more about your activities with Avion Village. How long were you there, Romy?
About 15 years.
About 15 years at Avion Village. And all of that time you were the manager?
Yes, all but the first 2 years.
Wasn't it unusual for a large corporation such as that to have a a lady manager?
Yes, that women were just beginning to do things, Ruthie. You know, it was a man's world. It's always been, and it'll always be a man's world. But women like to be recognized more, and they are. As somebody said, well, women have come a long way, but you know, we've been a long time doing it.
All right, here's some more of your community service photographs. This is a Chamber of Commerce to do, and I'd like for you to hold that up so that the camera can get that. And
that's
what do you
Bill
think?
Powers right there.
Bill Powers, yes. Is there anyone else in that that lives in Grand Prairie at this time?
Yes, this is Vic Ballou right here.
All right, and he's the one that has the plantation cake place, yes.
And the Mothers Club, cooked and served the banquets, like for the Chamber, for the Rotary and the Lions as they came.
All at Avion Village.
And if the weather was right, we had it out on the veranda, out in the open air. We had Governor Shivers there one time, and I believe the late Stufflebean, Mr. Stufflebean, was president.
All right, tell us about this and hold that up for the camera.
Oh, this is the BNPW.
Tell them what BNPW is.
The Business and Professional Women's Club. We first started a campaign to further women in business. And the Junior Chamber of Commerce, about the time we got our Texas Chamber of Commerce building here,
all right,
they had sold poll tax, and they didn't do a very good job. So we decided, well, let the BNPW do it.
All right.
So we did, and we sold more poll tax than had ever been sold in Grand Prairie. And when Lois Ballou and I went up to take the money and the books, they counted, and it came out to the T. And they said, well, what do you want? Number, we'll give you a number. And I drove, as long as I drove that car, I carried the number 14.
Wonderful.
And we were very proud of that. We did.
And your work in BNPW took you to many other things, Romy.
Yes.
Like Toastmistress and all of that, and you became famous in Grand Prairie as a wonderful speaker.
I was the voting
delegate?
Precinct chairman. I was precinct chairman down there for 13 years. When I came here, Ruthie, let me tell you this story. They was holding the election up at the old fire station, which is along in there about where the savings and loans.
All right.
And women would hardly go vote because the men were sitting around chewing tobacco, spitting, smoking, playing dominoes, and there just wasn't any place for women to go. So then as the town grew, they put a second precinct in, and they held it at Avion Village. And Mr. Singleton, who built the first home down there on the right side of 8th Street, and they moved, and so Mr. Turner called me and said, Lou Sterrett came out, and he said, have you got $2? I said, well, no, I don't. Well, will you loan it to me? Not knowing. And he said, yes. He pulled out two $1 bills and handed it to Lou Sterrett. And he says, now you're the precinct chairman. And for 13 years. And
well, weren't you one of the first women precinct chairs in Grand Prairie, Texas?
Ever held elected or a appointed office. And of course, I was on the Y organizational board and the other planning and zoning. I was on that. And
all right. Now, there's one famous board that you were on that you served as the very first woman on the Grand Prairie ISD Board of Education. Do you remember the year that you went in on that board?
54, wasn't it? 54.
And were you a retired teacher at that time, or were you still a teacher?
See, I hadn't gone back to teaching.
You had not gone back?
I didn't go back to teaching till 56, I believe, is 1 year or less. And I had just had 8 years. See, I had worked at Avion instead of going back to teaching when I finished my second round at college. And so I was on the school board. I was still working at Avion Village then.
All right. Now, after your school board tenure, then you went back to college, and now you come back teaching. And where did you go into teaching? Here in Grand Prairie? Tell us about it.
Well, the first year I taught was over at Travis. They didn't have a place in homemaking, and so I taught the 5th grade, 2 years.
All right.
And then Adams was built. And I went to Adams Junior High School as the homemaking teacher there.
All right.
And then I went over to the one over in Fairview, not Lee,
Lamar?
No,
Oh, Jefferson.
Jefferson Junior High.
Jefferson?
And there's where I was when I retired.
Wonderful. All right, now that brings us up almost to the present date, but before we get back to the things that you're doing today, let's take the memorabilia that you've brought. And Romy, hold up this baby picture of Romy Stewart before she was just what? How many years old? It looks like you're about 2 there,
Yes.
Romy. That's Romy Mildred Sandlin, the very first photograph of Romy, and isn't that exciting? And what is this beautiful old picture that you have here? Could you talk about it
Well,
just a
in
moment?
1911, my mother's parents, the DeWitts, had a 50th anniversary. And I was born in 1907. So right here on my grandfather's knee, and then my older brothers and sisters are scattered around. And there were over 100 people at this, out in the country, on the farm in Delta County, way over in the northeast corner of Delta County. In fact, part of his land went into Lamar County.
That's wonderful. All right, now you have before us some of your handwork.
Well,
explain some of your handwork, some of the things that you do now, and then we're going to get down to that beautiful silk quilt that you did as the very first item in your young life.
I'm always doing something. I've always been working in arts and craft all my life. My grandmother taught me. I pieced quilts at the age of 8 years. And then I did that, and when I was a teenager, I did this quilt of silk scraps. That is all silk scraps.
What would be
and I
the
quilted
year
it.
of what would be the year of this?
Oh, this would be about 19 and 20, 18 to 25 is when this would, somewhere along in there, 18 to 25.
That is
I don't know this
beautiful.
exactly. And I have, of course, I don't piece quilts anymore because I don't have any use for quilts. But I do make Africans. And now,
Oh, that is
this
lovely.
the latest one I have made. And I have a bedspread with the same pattern that I just enlarged the African. And I'm working on one now, a stained glass window one, which is going to be very colorful and very beautiful. I just, when I'm at home at night and watching TV, I got my hands going. And also, I've made over, in the last 2 years, I've made over 100 of these ribbon knit sweaters. So these are my pastime jobs now. See, they changed from that to this. And then in early days, when I was a teenager, I have a lot of crochet and faggoting, tatting, and stuff I did like that. I have the first piece of embroidery that I've ever done on a doily that is very pretty. I said, I think that I couldn't do better now.
All right, now, Romy, we know that you've used your talents in so many ways. For instance, I know of several of these that you have made and donated to BNPW, to the Seroptimist Club, to the Woman's Club, to many organizations here in town for fundraising projects.
Yeah.
How do you find time to do all of these good things?
Well, I work fast, and you know, you sit in the evening and watch TV a couple of hours, you can do a lot of work then. I never sit down in the daytime, Ruthie. I don't recall of seeing very many things I have done in the daytime. I'm doing something else. I'm not one that sits and watches TV. My time is when I'm at home in the evening, we'll say from 6 o'clock till bedtime.
All right, now there's one thing that many of the people in Grand Prairie do not know about you unless they know you fairly intimately. You have one of the most beautiful collections of garden, irises, daisies. You even have a gazebo in your backyard. You have a lovely garden, and you always have fresh vegetables. How do you find time to do that, Romy?
Well, early in the morning.
Early in the morning,
I
very
do that
early.
early in the mornings. And while it's cool, and you see, before the sun gets too hot. And I've got turnip greens coming up. You'll have to have fresh turnip greens a little later.
Well, I have some of the famous Romy Stewart irises all along the border, thanks to you at our home, and we're just so delighted. Romy, of all of the things that you do and all of your hobbies, what is the favorite of all?
Well, Ruthie, I don't know. I like to change. I seem like I get bored with this, and I'll try this a while. I'll try something else. I have a knitted African made out of Angora thread, It's the prettiest thing that I have ever done, and some knitted coats and sweaters that I did. But I don't care about doing them again. So I couldn't say, and I'm enjoying what I'm doing, another African, and I've enjoyed making these sweaters. And I don't know, next week I may pick up something else.
Now, Romy, I know that you and Mr. Stewart did not have any children, but you've left a legacy because you've adopted all of the other children that ever took homemaking and etc. While you were being a teacher.
Yes, well, I have a large family, and we're very close, and one of them may show up any minute at my house. In fact, I've got a niece from Colorado. Her daddy called me last night. She's supposed to get in sometimes today, and I'm going to pick her up. And I don't know when. I told him I'd be gone these 2 hours, but if she could catch me, I'd pick her up.
Right. Now, Romy, you've been president of almost every club in Grand Prairie that has been significant, and we have a letter from Women in Government dated 1957, and it's signed by a Mrs. Coolidge. And this was an invitation from some very important people in Dallas, and during that time they wanted you to run for a specific state office. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, Ruthie, I used to go to all the BNPW and the Serotomies conventions, and I was always on the program. And I made a speech over at Sherman, Texas, about the status of women, beginning with Joan of Arc. And came on up then to our own, Judge Hughes and Margaret Branch Smith. They were the latest at that time, you see, that had really made big accomplishments.
Yes.
And so they wined and dined me to run for state legislature. Well, I thought of it a lot, but you know, you got to have another job. And unfortunately, the job that I had would not let me be away like that. And you know, you can see that. And I couldn't give up my job and make a living by doing this. And of course, I was active in the Democratic Women's Club. And so that's where I met a lot of these women. And they sent me this letter and called several times. And I went over and had dinner with them and things like that. But I talked it over with them, and they understood. And I just didn't see I could do it.
Wonderful.
I'm proud of that letter, though.
Yes, you are. And Romy Stewart, we're extremely proud of you as a wonderful, you're not just a past leader in Grand Prairie, Texas, but you are continuing to exert your leadership because you are still a member of the Seroptimists, which meets every other week. You're into the women's division. You're into all of these clubs. And we want to thank you very much for giving your time to come today to talk with us about your past, about the present. And you know what, Romy? We're looking forward to your influence in Grand Prairie, Texas for many years to come. And we want to thank you for being one of the most interesting people that we have interviewed in our history series. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruthie. I've enjoyed it.
Wonderful. And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.